So hello, I'm John Kane, and I welcome you to Let's Talk Native on this Saturday, May 25th. While this program may not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do encourage and in some cases start conversations. We don't do prayers or buffalo speeches. We take a tough look at history, oppression, and survival. We talk about culture, the arts, politics, and identity. And we may step on a few toes along the way. But our real goal here is to bring people together by breaking down what separates us. We'll take on the false narratives and provide critical thinking to all that is being heaped upon us. And we do it all right here live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. So let's talk Native. But first, let me remind you that our audio does stream at www.letstalknative.com. And we stream live video of the show on Facebook Live. Our shows are available as podcasts after our broadcasts on your favorite podcast platform. And we post the video of the show on our YouTube channel, Let's Talk Native TV. You'll also find other videos that we've been banging out regularly over the last couple of years. And we're going to put in a new effort. We've been doing a little bit of some studio upgrades, both here in the audio studio and in our video sets. And we're going to put some more videos out there for you. And I realize attention spans being what they are, listening to a 1 hour show or watching a 1 hour show or even a 15-minute video can be a bit of a challenge for some of you out there. So we're going to keep our video short and sweet, try to entice you with some information that will make you want to look for more. Our goal here is to start a conversation, not to be the last word on any subject, but to keep people engaged so that when you're confronted with some of this, when you are out there confronted with racism, when you're confronting climate change or any of the stuff that you are well equipped with, at least being able to voice somewhat of a Native perspective, not trying to provide that Native perspective, but at least provide a place to begin that conversation. I am the host of Let's Talk Native. I'm assisted by Jake Proud here in studio, who's managing our video and our sound. Hey, we opened up with Bug and Malone, a track from his Humanity Volume 1 CD that won the Indigenous Peoples Awards just last week. I got to tell you, Bug and Malone not only was gracious in his winning this award, but he did a shout out to a bunch of us, and myself included, at least from the media standpoint, on giving him a voice, not just playing his music, but giving him a place on our show, both here and in New York. And so when I talk about that, we're gonna talk about the arts. I want to put a little bit of meat on that bone, because we've done some phenomenal things over the years, and something that I feel pretty proud of. Well, I guess let me state right here that we're entering this summer. We're entering our 10th year of Let's Talk Native. Now, are we some sort of viral sensation? No. And we're no media superstars. I by no means do I consider myself in any way, shape, or form a radio celebrity. But I keep doing it. And we've gone from commercial radio, a couple of different stations, to now where we're primarily doing internet radio for Let's Talk Native. Of course, I do a show in New York, and have been doing so for 5 years now. So I do have a New York radio platform. We're on an FM station right in the middle of the FM dial, 99.5 and WBAI. So I keep doing the show, and part of the reason that I've been able to do this thing for now entering our 10th year is because I don't need much. We built our own studio. It was tougher when we were doing commercial radio, because I needed sponsors, and I needed to pay for airtime. I literally bought airtime. But now we've got our own studio built up, one that we built for our purposes, but we offer out to the public. We're hoping that people will want to take us up on, whether you produce an audio, not to necessarily just do a show, but I also welcome people to come sit in with us. That's how Matt Hill got involved in doing the show with me so much. Ed Schindler and others, because the door was just open, and we just said, come join us. Come join us. You don't even have to speak on mic if you don't want to, and we put that out there. But in the process, we've also brought in guys like Murray Porter. We had Murray Porter sitting in our studio when we were doing commercial radio. Had his Juno Award for songs lived and life played, life played, songs lived, songs lived, life played. Okay, got it backwards. Um, we had him with his Juno Award mailed to him right here, and we actually took some video shots and some pictures of him right through his glass Juno Award. I mean, this is that was some good stuff. We've had some great artists join us. We've had some actors and actresses. We've had some some big name lawyers and politicians. I've had guys like Young Jibwe join me here on my show here and in my show in New York. Done some live events. Jeff Doreen and again Bug and Malone. Bug and Malone and I we did a whole special for what aired on what people call Thanksgiving Day last November, where we went through a bunch of his tracks and kind of charted a little bit of his life. I mean, the thing about musicians. And part of the reason that I am so drawn to having conversations with them is because they represent a different breed. The challenges that musicians go through in terms of bouts with depression and substance abuse and everything else. Man, it's amazing to me how the strength that some of these guys demonstrate in terms of perseverance to get through all of that, and of course have the creative process and for guys like Murray Porter or Bug and Malone or any of these other guys who use their music as a platform to talk about our issues. I mean, look, I do that in a radio show, and these guys do it in CD form. These guys do it in music, and so I mean, when I think about what we have been able to do in 10 years, have we built millions of listeners? No, but I keep providing what I think is a necessary voice and a necessary perspective on a bunch of these things, because I'll tell you, there's a few news items that we did that frankly didn't get proper coverage. Everything from a New York State senator getting involved in a brawl at the Seneca Niagara Casino. Some of what we've done with the mascot issues, whether it was helping the local school here in Western New York, Lancaster High School, change its mascot. And we were invited in to have a conversation about what that all means. So whether it was that or whether it's, voicing some of our concern about some of the National Football League team out of Washington, all of that. We've had some incredible conversations. We've oftentimes not taken the path that everybody else takes on many of these issues, and we don't do the show just to gain popularity. We do the show to have conversations that aren't being had everywhere else. We're not trying to have the same conversation. I'm not trying to be reiterate what every other talking head on radio or on television is doing. I want to offer a perspective that, while it isn't necessarily always offered up, once I have that conversation, I have people tell me time and time again, man, I'm glad you said that. I haven't heard anybody else say that on radio. So this show is different than many of the others, and it always has been. We offer a unique perspective. We offer conversations on on history that nobody wants to talk about. Offering a perspective. Look, I'm one of the first ones to talk openly about the Colin Kaepernick issue. Hawaii is a subject that I've given a tremendous amount of attention to. Everything from what essentially Hawaii has become, which is an illegal occupation by the United States. They call it fake state. I call it fake state. The whole idea that Hawaii has been inundated by the United States and illegally occupied it, with everything from its military bases, so it can assert its strong arm position globally, to what has been taken advantage of in terms of agriculture and trade and everything else. Hawaii has been a tremendous victim of United States imperialism. And they're not unlike much of what Native people on the continent have gone through, and yet there are strong people out there not only fighting things like the 30-meter telescope being put, that is being slated to be built on their sacred mountain, Mauna Kea, but even standing up and asserting that no, they are not a state of the United States, that they are a kingdom, and they have a legitimate right to claim and to assert themselves as the Kingdom of Hawaii, which is what they were before the United States showed up on their shores. So, look, we've taken on many of these tough subjects, and that's what we're going to continue to do. And is it popular? No. I piss people off every week, and there are people who are intimidated to come to be a part of this show and to be a part of these conversations. And look, I don't disrespect people on especially guests or anything like that. I offer a perspective that some people may find trouble with. I mean, I essentially managed to change the listserv on the doctrine of discovery served up by Phil Arnold at this Syracuse University. Why? Because I had the nerve to challenge some of what folks like Suzanne Harjo or some of the folks from Onondaga have been saying. I asserted that at the UN that even what they're doing with the passport issue is an example or an overt act that fits within the definition of genocide and denationalization. And that was met with resistance by some of the more assimilated voices that are out there. That's one of the things we do with the show. We stand up to the voices that say, no, we need to go out and vote, and yes, we need to run for offices, and we need to support their candidates. And I say, no, we don't. Look, there are plenty of other voices giving a different view than mine, but that's what I'm trying to offer up here is that no, you don't have to concede to that. And I don't care if it's Oren Lyons telling you to go out and vote, or Suzanne Harjo, or anybody else. We don't have to necessarily succumb to that. Even if some of the people that we've lifted up as heroes of ours have succumbed to it, doesn't mean that we all have to. I did the interview on The Takeaway with Tanzina Vega, her debut week. I did the interview and said, look, I'm not an American. And I didn't say it to insult Americans. But as we as Native people, and as we wrestle with things like our identity, which I talk about every week, these are some of the challenges that we face. And that's why we do this show. Look, before I get too much farther into it, I do want to say, look, this weekend, by many accounts, kicks off the summer season. And I want to wish everybody, but, not just Native people, but everybody, safe travels. We've got friends that have traveled to Akwesasne this weekend for their Guyana to Goa discussion that is taking place today and through tomorrow. I know I've got my friend Matt Hills on the road and others, and so I'm concerned about the travel and that people travel safe, especially as if you're traveling with family. Look, the season gets a lot of people on the road, and people aren't always careful. So again, I want to wish safe travels to everybody. We're also coming into graduation season, and again, the summer season starts, and so there's partying and all kinds of other stuff that we need to be concerned about. So I wish safety and good health and well-being to especially to those who are going to celebrate the season and celebrate again some of these life events, and and again, I express my concern about safe travel. Look, one of the things, as I talked about, we've addressed a lot of issues here. We do give a fair amount of attention to missing and murdered Indigenous women and men, boys, girls, whatever. And we're going to continue to do that. I'm working with James Gray, Sugoyeta, to try to build a bit more of a network. There are some that are out there already, and we're working out the details right now on adding a feature to this show, which may be either a weekly feature, or maybe a bi-weekly or a monthly, depending on how much content we have. I'm working with Vanessa Dundon from Missing Flowers, MMIWM, which is Missing Flowers, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Men. And we're going to, spend with this segment. We're going to spend some time talking about the latest alerts on who's missing. We're hoping to do some follow up, so we know who's been recovered, who's turned up that was missing. to those who have fallen victim to foul play. We're going to try to follow the investigations and the prosecutions if any such thing happens. But I want to give more specific detail, because when we talk about missing and murdered Indigenous women and children and men, we it's easy to think about it in just generically, but when you put a face on it, and like I said, last week I talked about this young woman from Chicago. Although she is probably Latinx or Hispanic, whatever the label is that people want to use. When I see people like that, to me they're indigenous. When you see a brown skinned person from this continent, there's a lot of labels we stick on them, but she was an indigenous woman and young woman, and she was murdered and had the baby ripped out of her womb. And I don't know, frankly, I'm not sure what the status of the baby is. But the same thing happened a few years ago to Savannah Graywind, who again, another indigenous woman who was murdered. And so when you can put a name and a face on the victims of these crimes, and of course put the name and the face out there for people who are missing, so before they become victims of foul play, hopefully there's something we can do. That's what I want. We want to play more of a role, and I want to use the show to do that. So, and again, is this gonna crank up our numbers? No, that's not what this is about. We want to provide a service, and hopefully, people will pay attention. Not only will we talk about the information, but we'll use our website, which is, again, letstalknative.com, www.letstalknative.com. We'll use the website to post up some alerts and some notifications. Of course, we've got a Facebook group page, a couple of them, one associated with this show and one associated with the show in New York, Let's Talk with John Kane. And of course, this one is Let's Talk Native. So we're going to use the resources that we've built up over the years, and including, almost, going into 10 years of this show, to provide this service, because this is one of those issues that unites us all. I mean, this is a universal problem. We face it in every one of our territories. And in fact, it's a global problem. Indigenous people are among the most vulnerable people to the crimes, and Indigenous women are the most vulnerable of all. And it's born out of not just imperialism and colonialism, but the rape culture that came along with that. Even these very pious individuals, or what people want to believe were these religious individuals who are a part of this imperialism, they weren't so religious that they weren't above committing rape, even as they were carrying venereal diseases and everything else. And that's and we talked about that. And I think that rape culture is still almost gives a certain gives people permission, and of course, with that rape culture comes male dominance and this idea of subjugating women. And of course, when you look at what the culture has done in terms of sexualizing women, and look, you don't have to watch porn to see women sexualized. You can watch Disney and see it done. So this is what has happened between Hollywood, again, animation like Disney and others that have reduced not only us as Indigenous people, but in particular our women into these caricatures, and by dropping a low shoulder and lifting a skirt, it's almost we're teaching children that this the sexualization of Native women or Indigenous women is okay. So I think it's really, really important that we network with each other and we create better communications so we can address these issues in the way that they really need to be addressed. And the more of us that that can pass the word when there is a problem, when there's when somebody turns up missing in a given area, the more people we have in an area that can look out. Because let's face it, I mean, let's be honest. Sometimes these missing women and boys are girls, men are people who are just look. they're fed up with their condition, with the condition of their communities, or some of the dysfunction in their families, and they take off. And even if that's what they're doing, we need to know that, so we know that our people haven't become victims of foul play, and the hope is that we can fix this up. We can begin an intervention to help families and to help relationships and to help parents and kids work out and their teens work out their problems, and certainly to get involved as communities. Look, I mean, am I gonna solve a problem in California? No, not necessarily. But if I can help, spread that word, so the people in that, on the West Coast or in the Northwest or in the Southeast. Look, we have native territories across the entire continent. I mean, Mexico, Canada, U.S., whatever you want to call the countries. We have indigenous populations in all of these. South America, Hawaii. I mean, so. If we care, and if we show we care, and we demonstrate our concern for each other, we can do more to help each other. So that's what one of the, as I mentioned in the promo here, I'm going to reflect a little bit on the past, but I'm also going to project about the future. And this is what we're going to do with the show. So not only are we going to continue to educate, and we're going to continue to talk about topical issues, current issues, current affairs, and that kind of stuff, contemporary issues. We're going to we're going to try to use the show to provide more of a service to our communities, and again, on a given week, it may be all about Pine Ridge. It may be all about Hopi Navajo territory. It could be Apache land. It could be So we're gonna dance around wherever there is a perhaps an uptick in people that have turned up missing or become victims of violence or whatever else, and that's what we're going to talk about. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I look forward to working out this, and whether we do live segments with call-ins, we're still working out some of the details. But with Missing Flowers, we hope we can provide a feature that is at very least every couple of weeks. We'll see how much content there is, but in all likelihood, we'll probably do something weekly, and again, get another voice weighing in on the subject, and whether it's Vanessa or Brooke or whoever is involved with the organization, that'll help give us some context and some content on the issues that are facing our territory. So that's what we're going to do. All right, hey, we're at the bottom of the hour, so. We'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more. I got some stuff coming up in New York this week, and we'll talk a little bit more when we come back. This is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk Native.
Open the eyes to the lies, history's told foul. Nation, baby. I was Rakim, Chuck D, and EPMD. Public Enemy #1 started freeing me. Believe me, I was Boogie Down Productions. KRS-One woke me up so I can function. I was MC Shan and Roxanne. I was Run DMC and Kumo D, my man. I was LL when he was bad as hell. I was Fat Gold Chains and even Furry Kane goes. I was Shell Told Adidas, British Knights and Feelers. And I was a hustler like ST, and I was down with cop killers. I was in the gang like Sugar Hill, had friends like Houdini, and I was slick like Rick and like the party with martinis. I was Doug Get Fresh with the Get Fresh crew. I was day to day with Fame Food, I thought you knew. I was Grandmaster Flash when I got the message. These are the plays, that's my man Curtis Bro as I wrecked it. I was Fat Boys and Starsky. Gigi Scott LaRock, Red Alert and Eric B. I was Jam Master J on the turntables. Biz Marquis when he got the vapors. He caught the MCs and used up extended warranties. While real MCs and DJs are a minority. MCs and used up extended warranties. While real MCs and DJs are a minority. I wanna rock the planet like African Bambaataa. I was down with Cross when he was down with Harassa. I was NWA and the Fifth Ward Boys. And if you hear any noise, it was me and my boys in the hood. Up to no good, rockin' Scarface. All I have in this world is my boss and my word. I was Fat Laces, B quiet, all you gas faces. You are slow talking, I'm fast talking and fast paced. And I never segregated rappers from the east to the west. I was Tupac and Biggie cause they flowed the best. I was always Dr. Dre, one of the best producers. Never got down with backpack Dr. Seuss's. I was Ice Cube when my man went solo. I was even down when you couldn't play with his yo-yo. I was a fugitive like K-Solo. I was beatboxing, boomboxing, slapboxing, breakdancing and popping. I was on the quest to find my so-called tribe.
All right, a little bit more Buggin' Malone, and again, my congrats to Buggin' for winning best rap hip hop CD at the Indigenous Music Awards this past week, and again, my props back to him for giving myself and others the shout out for helping him to stay inspired. These are. I'll tell you, it's not easy for Native artists, especially musicians, to make it in the business, because especially for hip hop. I mean, the thing about rap and hip hop is that it's urban music, and urban music became a thing because of, again, the dense population centers that Black artists were able to tap into to create that urban music sound. So when you talk about a Native artist, even Native artists who maybe they have their street cred from being raised or living in the cities, they don't have the urban crowd supporting them. So they've either got to be able to cross over into again to that market that supports that urban sound, or because we as a population, as Native people, we're not a big enough population to garner that success. So it is a very tough business, and it's not just for hip hop. I mean, when I think about guys like Murray Porter, who is as good a bluesman as exists anywhere, but again, crossing over into that industry that is dominated by so very few, they don't look to Indian country. I mean, look, that's the movie that came out, Rumble, The Indians Who Rocked the World, a phenomenal movie. But most people who saw that film didn't know. They didn't know that even as they hear Jesse Ed Davis playing the guitar lick on "Doctor My Eyes" from Jackson Brown, or look, you could have seen Guardians of the Galaxy 10 times over, and if you didn't know that it was Redbone singing "Come and Get Your Love," if you don't know that, you don't know what role Native people have played in music, and not just contemporary music, but even going back to where blues and the Native sound that even in fact affected Black music. No, this is what's so it's difficult, and so I'm glad to offer my support, and to whatever extent my show here, my show in New York can help any of these guys, whether it's young Jibwe or Jeff Doreen or any of these guys who are using music as a tool to further some of their other goal. I mean, look, I have to applaud these guys. All right, hey, let me thank my sponsors before I get too carried away here. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses. Eric White and ERW Enterprises, and those of you, there's a few others who help from time to time. One in particular that helps monthly, and that's why we can enter our 10th year. We wouldn't have even been here if I didn't have folks like you and of course others who sponsored us over the years, especially when we were doing commercial radio. If we didn't have that support, we wouldn't be able to enter our 10th year, and so I am thrilled to be able to do that. And, look, would I like to bump up our listenership? Absolutely. But, I know that I'm providing a service, and it may be only to a handful here and there. But I'm hoping that the conversations that we start here continue on. And so they begin to affect. I know that we're doing a different kind of radio show than anybody else. Nobody's doing quite what we're doing here. And, of course, my show in New York is not just a Native perspective on contemporary issues. It's a talkback show. We take phone calls and look, we get all kinds. We get some people who support Native people and some people who condemn it. I mean, to me, it's amazing at this stage of the game, we're still having a debate over whether native mascots at high schools and colleges and pro teams, whether that's still. I mean, it's hard to believe that's still a thing. I mean, and when you think about some of these mascots being using, racial slur like Redskin, whether it's the NFL team in Washington, the nation's capital. I mean, how ironic is that? That the nation's capital, for a country that wants to stand up as if they are represent the hallmark of human rights, and yet the one of the biggest sports in the United States, football, has a racial slur for its name at in the nation's capital. I mean, you would think people would be embarrassed by it. But again, this is like, what happens in the United States is everything becomes a right-left conversation. Not that there aren't plenty of racists on the left, but the right looks at any kind of correction, anything that's pointed out as having been wrong or being wrong. Oh yeah, that's just being politically correct. Well, look, there's a real problem with with calling somebody by a racial slur, and the fact that you would actually use a racial slur for a team name, it's hard to believe that's still a thing. And then we get into the debate whether utilizing a people for just purely for entertainment reasons, and for mockery, I guess, for high schools or colleges or pro teams. Well, what's wrong with that? And we get into this whole question of whether utilizing our images or our names or our culture, our dance, whatever, it's supposed to, they want to claim that it honors us. I mean, it's amazing to me, because if you put it into perspective with history, and that's part of what I try to do. I mean, when you talk about the dichotomy of white kids getting to play Indian, and mock Native people for entertainment and for sport, at the same time, Native kids are being ripped from home, sometimes hauled thousands of miles away or 1,000 miles away from their families and their community, put on residential schools, and having the Indian beaten out of them. Kill the Indian, save the man. I mean, how can anybody suggest that this idea that school kids acting out as Native people for their mascots is honoring us, at the same time that our children were being beaten for speaking the language, for trying to hang on to any shred of Native identity? I mean, it's absurd. It's absurd. I was recently asked about working on a survey that is being utilized to understand what Native people go through in terms of the STEM fields of study, especially, and the conflict that that comes from that. And of course, what does that all mean? Well, one of the issues is that we as Native people who have a sense of responsibility, not just as stewards of the earth. I that sometimes can be I don't know, looked at almost as trite or or overused. Just like the expression the 7 generations concept. The whole idea there is that we have a responsibility to make sure that we do no harm, so that the next generation, and including the generations we'll never see, which is why we refer to 7 generations, because that's far enough down the road. Look, it's easy to look at your kids and say, well, I want to do right by my kids. Or maybe your grandchildren, you say, oh, I want to do right by my grandkids. I want to make sure that the world that they have is, they have all the things and maybe even more than what I had. But when you realize that through consumption and through some of the very practices that we've adopted in the name of improving ourselves or improving the quality of life, that there's a cost that is being that is being almost like mortgaged. We're mortgaging the future of people that perhaps we'll never see. So that's where the 7 generations thing. We're supposed to be responsible enough so that when we make a decision, we do certain things today, that we will not leave a negative impact for those children we will never see, for those generations we will never see. So how does that relate to our role in technology? Well, I mean, think about what technology has done. No, and I'm not saying science and technology are bad things. They aren't. But when you consider how technology is oftentimes tied directly to, war, weaponry, creating weapons of mass destruction. I mean, look at the whole idea of nuclear power was this. Okay, now that we've created a bomb that can, or the ability to blow things up in ways that were unimaginable. There were some people who were concerned the first time they lit off a nuclear weapon, an atomic bomb, that they could have wiped out the entire population. There was a fear there. Some scientists said, "Look, we don't know. We don't know what kind of chain reaction happens when you split atoms like that." But you know what? In the interest of science, some were willing to do that. And so we built, mankind built bigger and bigger and bigger nuclear weapons. And then the promise, we'll create energy with it. Well, now we've created a mess with that. So where do we fit in that? Because even beyond the STEM fields, even beyond the science and math fields, even our men who were involved in construction, which is essentially taking technology and turning it into something. Look, we had some of our men working on nuclear power plants. We had some of our men working on nuclear silos. I mean, this is what our iron workers, our high steel, and our guys did. So where does that becomes a conflict? I mean, and of course I can't help but think about this idea of putting this huge telescope on Mauna Kea in the interest of advancing science. Well, for one thing, what is that really advancing? Oh, it's going to be. I mean, I've heard some people try to sell this as the modern day version of the Polynesian Voyager Spirit. Give me a freaking break. This is about building a huge building on top of a mountain that has already been exploited by University of Hawaii and so many other areas of astronomy, so they could build telescopes. There's already 13 telescopes up there, but no, that's not enough. We got to build a bigger and bigger and bigger billion-dollar enterprise. Well, where does that leave Native people? I mean, even those of us who are interested in technology, in advancing technology, at some point we get into a conflict because we understand that technology is somehow working against us, our culture. We're working against our commitment to 7 generations. Because when you advance these technologies, look, it's real easy to look at how it's supposed to improve life, but we don't consider what the downsides are. Well, if you're going to build a building on the top of a mountain that some people consider sacred, there's a downside almost immediately. And if you look at what technology has done, look, we're broadcasting this thing on Facebook, and we're using the internet for it. And while that can be a positive thing, it's funny. A few years back, a group out, I think it was Coeur d'Alene, they attempted to create almost a native version of Facebook, Rescast. And we couldn't get our own people to support it enough. They couldn't get enough membership on Rescast. That's REZKAST, I think it was, or I don't know if it was Z or S. It might be RESKAST. I don't even think you can find it online anymore. But I used to put all of my shows up on Rescast. That's where I saved the audio. And of course, it had plenty of fanfare. They spent a couple $1 million trying to develop it. I've got friends like Charles Vargas and others down in Apache territory trying to do more to create our own ability to utilize technology and be in the driver's seat on it. Well, I mean, these are the challenges that we have. And I'm not giving the answers here. I'm just talking about what the problems are. The problems are that we've been used in many of these situations. I mean, again, going back to war. At the same time they were trying to snuff out our languages, they decided they're going to weaponize our language. Now, that may not seem like a STEM field, but communication certainly is. So what was the most advanced code that they could use so the Japanese couldn't break their code in terms of communication? Well, we're trying to kill a language. Maybe we can find enough people who still have bits of it that we can exploit. And look, I know, we keep hearing about these code talkers and what heroes they were. Well, look, what they did as individuals may have been heroic, But think about what was really done there. The very languages that they were trying to kill, they weaponized. And they used our people. They didn't provide us with tools to help us preserve our language. No, not at all. So they got to exploit something that was ours for their technological advances, for their war machine. and then we're all supposed to seek and have this special kind of pride and encourage our kids and our grandkids to enlist to serve in that same military that did that to us. See, this is where it gets challenging. I'm not against science and I'm not against technology, but we as Native people, we get exploited in this stuff. You know, where do you think they blew up many of those nuclear weapons? Either in the South Pacific, where indigenous people are impacted, or on native lands. Not only native lands where they blew these things up underground, but where they stored the nuclear waste. Look, even as I sit here today, 30 miles upriver. 30 miles upriver is where the West Valley demonstration project. This whole idea of what West Valley was supposed to be, it was all about atoms for peace. Yeah, that's what they called it. They were going to reprocess nuclear rods to essentially provide almost free power to people. That's what they're going to do. Well, that didn't happen. So what West Valley became was a place to store military spent rods and military nuclear waste. And of course, what happens? It leaches out of the ground. They think that they're smart enough to overcome the forces of nature, even as they've done something unnatural like create this nuclear waste. And you know what they call it? What they call it when they see radioactive waste leaking from a storage area? They call it a plume. Isn't that nice? That makes it sound like a feather, right? Well, they have a plume, which means they can see this area that just kind of seeps through the ground. And where does it come into? The Cattaraugus Creek, the river that runs right through the Seneca Nation territory of Cattaraugus. So we become the victims, and usually the most vulnerable victims. Where do you think all the Agent Orange went to when they decide they're going to discard it? Right along the San Carlos River in San Carlos Apache. So we become the dumping grounds for their waste. We become the test areas. You know what happens in Hawaii? They use one of those islands just to blow the crap out of it. They just light off bombs. Same in Puerto Rico. One of the beautiful beaches of Puerto Rico. Nah, we're just going to use this indigenous land to blast the crap out of it. That's how they advance their technology. That's where some of these STEM fields get utilized. You know, it's fine to say, okay, we're going to build a 30-meter telescope and we're going to put it up on Mauna Kea because we're interested in reaching and looking into space and understanding the cosmos. Yeah, until it becomes some sort of tool for weaponizing space. And don't tell me that hasn't been talked about. I mean, NASA, for all of the work that has been done with NASA, how much of that, the advancement of some of that technology has been weaponized? I mean, there's a fine line. Not only were the first astronauts, bomber pilots and fighter pilots, they were military men themselves, but it becomes reciprocating, where advancements in the aerospace industry. I mean, that line between aerospace industry and the military industrial complex, there's no line there. It's hand in glove. So it is difficult. It is difficult because while I don't want our people left behind from a technology standpoint, where's our role in it? Where's our role in trying to be responsible to the future generations of not just our people? I mean, look, when we talk about 7 generations, we aren't just talking about 7 generations of our own offspring. We aren't talking about our own family tree. We aren't even necessarily only talking about human beings. We're talking about what 7 generations of life are going to experience. We have a responsibility to all of it. Now, it isn't because God or creator or some, personification of the power of creation gave us that responsibility. No, we have enough sense. We may have been the only human beings on the planet who had enough consciousness to say, no, we need to be responsible, because the things that we do impact the future. Everything we do today. Now, it may be in a small way, and if we manage the things that we do, we know that nature all by itself cleans up after us to some extent. Until we go over the top, until we start producing, we don't produce water, we produce plastic bottles for water. So until we start owning the negative impacts that we're having every day, well, look, we have seas of plastic floating out there. That's what we've contributed as a species to the planet. Contamination, climate change. That's what we've contributed to the planet. Well, look, we're great at being these technological wizards. Well, when do we turn it into something good? Not just something that we think is self-serving, that's going to make our lives easier, because that may not be the solution. Maybe we need to use technology to say, what do we need to do to give us the tools to work harder, not to live easier, but to live longer. What are the tools that we need to develop that's going to enable us to do some things that are going to have a positive impact on the next generation, the generation after that, down to 7 generations. Those children that we will never see. I mean, this is part of the question, and this is why we need to have the conversations. When we're battling, social justice issues, those things impact generation after generation after generation. So when people say, well, there's nothing wrong with being called a redskin. Well, yes, there is something wrong with it. The idea that you're reducing, for one thing, even if you don't associate the word redskin with the bloody corpses that were left from being scalped, for bounties. Even if you don't do that, even if you're going to say, no, we're only talking about the color of your skin. So you're going to reduce a human being to the most outer layer of our existence, our mere skin. See, these are the things that if we don't address them, then every generation becomes more and more negatively impacted by it. That's why we try to have the conversation. That's what we try. That's why we try to do on the show, is to say, let's talk native, anything. Let's talk native arts. Let's talk native culture. Let's talk native history. Let's talk native politics. And in the process, look, have we changed the world? No, maybe not. But, we provide a little bit more conversation, and we do have impact. Look, like I said, when a headline read a few years back that a New York State senator was savagely ambushed by native people at the Seneca Niagara Casino, our show here turned the headlines within a day. So what stopped being, or what initially sounded like, this poor New York State senator was ambushed by Indians. I mean, they even threw fire water and all kinds of other stuff into the conversation. We turned the story, and as this guy wanted, was out for blood, we exposed him for the putz that he really was, and the headlines died. We did that. We did that with this show, and with help. I mean, with folks who provided me with video and interviews, people who were at the event, who witnessed what took place. So we do have impact, and I would like to think that some of what I've talked about on the show has perhaps shaped or even emboldened the Seneca Nation as it's battled the state of New York over them trying to rape them for their gaming revenue. I mean, I'm not saying we don't dictate, and we haven't forced them into doing anything, but we certainly have provided information, and we've given the rationale, and by having the conversation here on the show, it starts the conversation out there. And so the whole idea of who supports the native position on gaming, who supports the native position on mascot issues, who supports the native position on state politics, national politics, well, we at least begin some of that conversation. And of course, I still, once again, I got to return back to the sponsors that we've had over the years, the people who've enabled us to do some of this stuff. And some people have done, bits and pieces here and there. As I sit here today, I'm staring in front of my MacBook, which was a gift to me by my good friend Neville Spring, who is one of those guys who supported the show over the years. I've had people who, guys like Harry Wallace, who helped me with hotel rooms when I was staying in New York. And of course, my good friend Sugar Montour, who was one of my early sponsors, and one of the guys who supported this show in one of the biggest ways. And of course, my good friend Ross John, who continues to be my biggest sponsor for the show. So I mean, these are people who find value in what we do here. And of course, it isn't just what we do on twice a week on Let's Talk Native and once a week in New York City. We bang out some videos. I've written columns. All of the support that we get for doing what we do here enables us to do more. So I thank all of you. I thank all of you who've supported the show. And we're not done yet. We're going to keep doing it. We're going to keep doing it. And whether we got a dozen people watching or whether we have 12,000 people watching, we're gonna or 12 million. It'd be nice. But whatever we've got, we're gonna continue to have the conversation. So even as a handful of people catch the show, they're gonna say, I heard something. I heard something there. Maybe you didn't know about Lincoln, signing the execution order for 38 Dakota. Maybe you didn't know that Ruth Bader Ginsburg cites the doctrine of Christian discovery to rule against the Oneidas. Maybe you didn't know some of this stuff. Maybe you didn't know that a Trump appointee sided with the liberals on two Native cases, which I talked about the last show. These are things that are important to know and keep our eyes open on. And of course, as I said in the first half of the show, we're going to take a keen and particular interest in this missing and murdered Indigenous women and men issue. We're gonna stay on it, and we'll begin to unfold a bit of a feature that we'll have here, maybe once a week or twice a month. We'll figure that out as we go. And of course, I'll work with my good friends, my friend James Gray, on doing more with trying to create a network. So that all works from this base that is Let's Talk Native. And again, I thank you for the support. I thank all of you who share the show, who share the podcast, the videos, and I really do appreciate those of you who offer the comments. That's how that enables us to keep the conversation going beyond the show, beyond this microphone. So we appreciate it. Look, I want to thank you for a bit of what I call these kinds of shows the mixed bag show. I don't have one topic to talk about. I kind of bring a few things together, and so I appreciate you giving me your time and your attention. Well, we'll see you back here on Tuesday. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native.